دكتور. The 2 minutes are up. I'm just kidding.
شكرا. I think it's 2 minutes is not enough to put a questions and comments, but I will try to do my best.
Questions.
Question. أنا عندي سؤالين. السؤال الأولاني، طبيعة الرئيس الأمريكي الجديد مشحون بالغرور والكبرياء.
He is arrogant and all false pretenses, rebuilding the United States, rebuilding the world. In your opinion, gentlemen, to the left side, will the American president amend the Constitution to make the term of residency 7 years or 3 successive terms? Secondly, many leaders led their nations to defeat in the midst of great victories. The first is Anwar al-Sadat, and then Saddam Hussein after his victory in the Iran war, and thirdly, Gorbachev. He led his country into defeat when he had the largest competing army in the world because of their very nature, their arrogance maybe. Through your following of the American president's campaign, do you conclude that he will lead America into defeat and not victory? I think so. Do you agree or do you have a different opinion? سنأخذ الأسئلة أولا ثم نترك المجال للإجابة. Thank you very much to the panelists. I have a question regarding the future of American Gulf relations. It seems to me that the biggest challenge here, aside from the Gaza war, is the question of China. China seems to me in the American-Chinese relations looks different somewhat than how China appears in the Chinese Gulf relations. For the United States, the prime objective is to contain China and curtail its economic growth, not to allow it to have enough resources to build its military resources. Here we seem to be facing two different views of China. Until now we are talking about the natural position being the attempt to create a balance between the two. It seems to me this circle is narrowing and more, and the United States is more aggressive now. It started trying to delay China using some technologies. I think the pertinent question here is, this is a challenge facing all Gulf countries, and Dr. Rumahi mentioned that. Then shouldn't these GCC countries or Gulf countries unite their positions, act as a bloc to deal with this situation, because it is present now and the pressure will increase regardless of who the president will be, because the Democrats, the Republicans, the elites in the United States, they all agree on facing up to China, and all the elites in the Gulf agree on expanding relations with China. So this is our forthcoming challenge. شكرا. سأخذ سؤالين فقط. السيدة هناك والدكتور عبد الهادي. Thank you Dr. Palmer and Dr. Christian. شكرا لكما لمساهمتكما الثرية. نحن نحتاج حقيقة إلى هذا.
and I'm gonna speak it or say it in Arabic. So دكتور محمد يعني احنا فعلا امام يعني على الرغم من انه قصرت التنورة وقصر الحديث إلا أنه كان خليني أوصفه بشكل دقيق شوي عام جدا بدون ما يكون في تحليل عميق للقراءة اللي حضرتك يعني حسب العنوان التحديات في العلاقات الخليجية الأمريكية ما بعد حرب غزة، وما شفناش إنه بأي ثمن سيتم فعليا إنه يكون في علاقة مقابل.
We have not seen the cost. You said there is a spiral downwards a movement in the ethical standards and the liberal standards or ethics, and I'm quoting from your speech that America's friends should be twice as wary of America's enemies. Now we are talking about joint defense pacts with the United States, and maybe we Arabs and Gulf countries are weak enough. We need an ally to defend us and protect us from Iran. So why are we giving others the right to come and to protect us, but do not give Iran the right to arm itself to defend itself also? And going back to what you said in the morning session when you quoted an American, when you said Hamas or the resistance in Palestine is a tool of Israel. Israel is a friend of the United States, and we saw America's total bias towards Israel and the total collapse of the international ethical standards. So who is going to make us feel safe? In whose hands? And at what expense? Are we going to do that at the expense of the Palestinian cause? The Palestinians are not asked if they have to accept the 1967 borders, and we're not talking after all about American fairness or justice in their intervention. We see how they are, and we see how in the past the Gulf countries have paid by way of a cost or a price, and what price will they pay this time around? Dr. عبد الهادي الرجاء التزام بالوقت. I'll try and make my question. The basic idea for the Trump or Trump's personality, I think there is far too much focus on Trump's personality and total ignorance of empires. Empires always, no matter how militarily strong, whenever they realize that they're losing economically, they'll use any force to restore that. And Professor, you talked about the deep state or the deep State Department. They are bigger than Trump. This is true. But does Trump have a strategic perception which is supported by the State Department that we can use military force and ignore any ethical standards and support all dictatorial regimes in the world, including attacking democratic European regimes only because they don't pay enough to America? Maybe it's not Trump the person, maybe it's the needs of the American empire. آسفة، علي أن أتوقف الآن لنعطي الفرصة للإجابة. أنا آسفة. We cannot hear the speaker without a microphone, but the moderator is saying we are already 10 minutes late. إذا سأعطي كل متحدث دقيقتين ليختاروا السؤال ويرد عليه الدكتور محمد. كان هناك سؤال موجه لك، الأسئلة الأخرى كانت موجهة للجميع. إذا دقيقتان لكل واحد منكم، بعد ذلك سننهي هذه الجلسة. دقيقتان طويلتان أكثر مما ينبغي. Brother Asad, I agree with you with the idea regarding China and the United States. We need more rational thinking. We need a free ceiling, no limits for our freedoms. We are in a limbo, I agree with you, but I think the American power is the prevalent hegemonic power at the military and economic levels. An example, if it wasn't for America's stance on the side of the Ukraine would have been gone and forgotten within weeks. And also without American intervention, the ceasefire in Lebanon wouldn't have seen the light of day. And Netanyahu said that he wants to focus on Iran, he wants to refresh his army, and he wants to also because of lack of ammunition. Trump is somebody said that our thinking in terms of generalities. I suggested to Netanyahu that should take Hassan Nasrallah, but he refused. Trump said something that all the Israeli hostages have been killed. Trump said that. I think this is what Israel thinks. That's why it treats the hostages in this manner. Dear lady, I gave some ideas on the what is our perception of this relationship. I said that he will not, Trump will say to the Gulf states, I will not help you with your deterrence without you paying, and you will have to pay for the reconstruction, Lebanon and the Gulf, Gaza. And you have to buy more weapons from us. All the Gulf countries' weapons are American, and the military doctrine is American too. Very little of our weapons in Kuwait were bought from the Soviet Union, but this was before the war. After that, America is a necessary evil. We have to understand that. We are the least people when it comes to lobbying. The Saudis are active, the Emiratis are active, but we do not work collectively. I remember our late Ambassador Sheikh Salim al-Sabah, they wanted to start what they call AAA, American Arab Association. I think it was because of we are too democratic, they squabbled between themselves and the whole project was doomed to failure. I think we should look at our own shortcomings and then see how we can benefit from others. Our shortcomings are evident. In Palestine, if there is no unified Palestinian leadership, I think we will have a problem. I said that more than once. I said people may differ with me. Hamas is of benefit to Israel by definition and acceptance of all researchers. because all the monies used to go to Tel Aviv, and then from that to go to Palestine. And there is 20,000 or more Palestinian laborers working in Israel. What am I saying? I'm saying Hamas is a need for Israel. Israel's strategy is based on separating the Palestinians. And every time there is a call to establish a Palestinian state, the Israelis will immediately say, yes, they should have a unified leadership. The Palestinians have always been divided from the days of al-Nashashibi and al-Husseini. I'm not talking to you, I'm addressing the young generation. Al-Hussein and al-Shashabi, then our love of the Palestinians makes us tell them the truth. If they don't want to listen, they are free to do so. شكرا لك الرجاء. Let's the
There will be opportunity for discussion afterwards if you guys would like to discuss it. Dr. Christian?
Thank you. There was a question about the Constitution. I think politically it's not possible. I mean, theoretically it's possible as a mechanism to change. Would need a 2/3 majority vote in the Senate and the House, and US politics is so polarized right now that I think there's a reason why there hasn't been an amendment successfully passed for more than, I think, 40 years now. So politically it's feasible, but I think it's impossible realistically. In terms of a leadership, Trump's leadership ending in defeat for the values that he talks about, I think if you're a leader talking about domestic traitors and enemies of the people within, that's a very slippery slope, and it's really going against the American exceptionalism, the whole American dream, that you're now talking about people within your country and threatening to deprive millions of citizenship as well. That this is something that is going to be incredibly divisive and weakening of the social bonds that have brought the US together. And Trump ran in 2016 claiming to make America great again. Well, he's still saying we're going to make America great again. But it should be, we're going to make America great again, because he had 4 years the first time to try and do it. In terms of China and Chinese Gulf relations, that's going to be a straight divergence, I agree. There's already been a lot of pressure on the UAE from the Biden administration, not just from the Trump administration, on the UAE to begin to dial back some of the military and strategic links with China. Gulf leaders don't want to be put into a position of having to choose. That's been very clear over the last 3 years, especially with Russia-Ukraine. From a Gulf perspective, this fight is not our fight. This great power competition, strategic rivalry between the US and Russia, or the US and China, is not our strategic rivalry. We're going to continue to put our interests first, and they should. That's what nation states do. But absolutely, it could be an area of immediate divergence between Gulf elites and US policy elites, I think. And finally, on Trump's personality, now, I mean, absolutely right. We've seen empires in decline in the past, and that's when they lash out. And you could maybe argue that Trump, the mobilization that he's managed to get, this kind of coalition of voters, until this election, you could have argued was a coalition of maybe white working class voters who were seeing the world change around them. But what's so interesting now, it's fascinating that Trump won increasing support among black, Hispanic, and other voters who the Democrats, I think, had probably assumed would be part of the Democrat coalition, and in the long run would actually be a more stronger Democratic base. And Trump seems to have found a way to peel them away, which I think would be fascinating to see if that can outlast Trump, whether it's just a one-off, or is it the beginning of a trend? Because you could argue that Obama, well, actually the Democrats in 2006 in the midterms, and then with Obama, 2008, 2012, they put together this coalition of voters, and Trump is now being able to pick them off group by group. So I don't know what you might think of it.
Thank you. There are so many moving parts in every story you can tell about the world, in practically every country and region as well. So that makes it very interesting for us as scholars, but it also makes it a time of great anxiety because we don't actually know how these trends are all going to play out. To Christian, in regard to the American Constitution and perhaps increasing the number of terms a president could have, you know, Trump says so many different things. He joked he was not going to leave office in 2020, and then we get January 6, 2021. He said he was going to extend his first administration by 2 years because of the Russia impeachment inquiry and so on. He says he's going to be a dictator on day one. The Supreme Court says pretty much you can be a dictator for 4 years and you can still get away with it. I made a prediction in 2016 that people might write a book after Trump's administration, The Education of Mr. Trump towards the traditional center. I was pretty wrong then, and I think I'm not going to make any predictions about that now. That is to say, I think all bets are off because I think Donald Trump does deserve to be considered alone as well. I suspect there has been no American president who is quite so personalist, quite so idiosyncratic, and quite so out of the kind of the machine as much as he is. But nevertheless, his ideology, as much as we could call it, or his mental worldviews and so on, are not entirely outside of the broader American set of American traditions. And I agree with you that, I mean, when I say American empire, when I go to the US, I tend to get shouted at quite a bit, and then in many circles in London and the UK as well. Here, I think probably people will be cheering me. I hope. But I do believe that the United States has an empire, that the American foreign policy establishment is the engine room of that empire. But its impacts have created many of its own problems. One of the key projects of the American empire, if you like, was Europe and European unity. But at the same time, Europe should not get so strong as to have its own army, its own nuclear weapons and deterrent and so on. That is to say, be big and strong, but not as big and strong as we are. And the same with China. China is partly an American project. China today. The China of 1950s, 60s, and 70s was a thorn in the side of the West and the United States. A revolutionary power supporting national liberation movements in Asia, in Latin America, and so on, Africa, and so on. But now, fully signed up to the liberal international order. In 2017, President Xi, World Economic Forum, we stand for globalization and rules and so on and so forth. Just 1 minute, a long minute. But what I'm saying is many of the challenges have come as a result of the successes of the various American projects. But China has now threatening, to some extent, quite a way down the line, American hegemony. But we can see Obama from 2014 onwards changing, 2011 pivot to Asia, Trump with tariffs, Biden, so-called Biden economics is underwritten partly by the tariffs and extreme competition with China as well, and Trump too threatens even greater. But I don't think they threaten the destruction of China. It's the containment of China.
But we're really
So-
out of time. So
Yeah.
if you wanna wrap up your point, I don't want to interrupt
No,
you
no,
in the middle of a sentence. But if you want to wrap up your
No,
point,
I think I'm wrapped up.
okay.
That's all right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Well, thank you all for this discussion. I know it at some points got heated. There's a lot to unpack and so much to consider about the state of the Middle East and U.S. politics for sure. I want to thank you all for joining us today. I appreciate listening to your insights and the perspectives of our distinguished